Glory Widner, the mother of 14-year-old Emmy Widner, found herself in a difficult situation upon learning about her young daughter's pregnancy. Despite the emotional pain and turmoil, Glory never abandoned Emmy and was always there to support her. However, their family was about to face an even greater ordeal, one that no one could have foreseen at the time. Born in 1973, Emmy Widner was one of 5 children in the family. In addition to her, Glory raised an older son, John Paul, and 2 younger daughters. After divorcing her husband, who showed no interest in the fate of his own children, all the responsibility for the kids fell on Glory's shoulders. Despite their difficult financial situation, the Widners had their own modest little house in Indianapolis. Diligent and hardworking, Emmy was her mother's main helper around the house. The girl cooked meals, cleaned the home, and babysat her little sisters. At the same time, she did not neglect her studies, for which she had a remarkable aptitude and even dreamed of becoming a teacher in the future. Bright, cheerful, and friendly, Emmy with her wonderful smile evoked sympathy in everyone who knew her. But one day, Emmy's carefree girlhood life was divided into before and after. At not quite 14, she became pregnant. For a long time, Emmy did not dare to tell her mother about her condition. For almost half a year, she hid her rounded belly under loose clothing, and none of her relatives noticed anything. However, as time passed, it became increasingly difficult to mask the obvious signs of pregnancy. Eventually, Emmy gathered her courage, approached her mother, and, in tears, told her about her situation. "Mom, I'm so afraid you'll hate me," the girl sobbed. Despite all her shock and confusion, Glory found the strength to hug her daughter and offer words of support. "It was the scariest moment of my life. It seemed like it couldn't get any worse," she later recalled. However, at that moment, Glory did not yet know what horrific events awaited them. The father of the child turned out to be 17-year-old Tony Abercrombie, a friend of Emmy's older brother. The lovers met in secret, and no one in the family suspected their relationship. Upon learning about her daughter's pregnancy, Glory categorically forbade her from seeing Tony and insisted on a complete break from the boy. When the news of the pregnancy leaked beyond the family, surprisingly, everyone, friends, neighbors, classmates, teachers, supported Emmy and tried to help her. The girl was very worried that due to the pregnancy and childbirth, she would have to miss school and her performance would deteriorate. Therefore, she came to school earlier than others and tried to study new material in advance. On October 25, 1987, 14-year-old Emmy Widner gave birth to a healthy baby girl, whom she named Emily. And just a week after giving birth, the young mother returned to her school desk, continuing her education. Glory realized how important it was for her daughter to get a good education, so she did everything to facilitate this. She looked after her newborn granddaughter, allowing Emmy to attend classes, and even let her teenage daughter go out with friends. Despite the difficulties, Emmy did not give up. She studied hard, remaining one of the best students in the class. Teachers constantly praised the girl for her diligence and perseverance. Life seemed to have settled down, with the hardships behind them. But fate had prepared one more cruel test for the Widners. On the morning of November 13, 1989, 16-year-old Emmy woke up with a severe sore throat. She told her mother that she would stay home to take care of little Emily and would miss school. Glory offered to take her granddaughter to a nanny, but Emmy refused. After having breakfast with her family, the girl stayed home with her 2-year-old daughter. Glory went to work, her brother went to school, and her little sisters went to elementary school. Nothing, it seemed, portended trouble. At 9:30, Glory called home, but Emmy did not answer. Several hours passed, and Glory's phone calls still remained unanswered. The worried woman asked a neighbor to visit the Widner house and check if everything was okay with Emmy and Emily. Agreeing to help, the neighbor soon returned and informed Glory that no one answered the door, and inside there was complete silence. Gripped by fear, Glory hastily left work and rushed home. Crossing the threshold, the first thing she noticed was little Emily, who was sitting alone on the stairs. The woman desperately called out for Emmy, but there was no answer. Climbing to the second floor, Glory opened the door to her daughter's room and froze in horror. On the bed lay Emmy Widner's naked body, around which crimson bloodstains spread. The girl was no longer breathing. In despair, the mother rushed to the phone and called the police. The law enforcement officers who arrived at the scene thoroughly examined the Widner family's home. Their initial assumption was an unsuccessful robbery. According to the police, stereo equipment and a graphic equalizer belonging to the victim's older brother, John Paul, were missing from the house. Emmy's piggy bank, an ordinary glass jar with $50 inside that the girl was saving for school supplies, was also stolen. Although there were no obvious signs of a break-in, experts suggested that the perpetrator could have entered the dwelling either through the unlocked back door or through the front entrance if Emmy herself had opened it for him. In the girl's room, forensic investigators found a whole range of evidence: traces of sperm on the bedding, a bloody handprint on the wall, and several samples of hair from the attacker's body and head. The medical examiner concluded that the girl was first hit on the head with a sharp object, then abused, and finally strangled. It's chilling to realize that throughout all these terrible events, little Emily was probably nearby, witnessing the abuse of her mother with her own eyes. Fortunately, no harm was done to the 2-year-old child herself. Trying to obtain at least some testimony from Emily, the police questioned the girl about the events of that day. The tot just ran back and forth around the room, repeating that her mom was very angry at the time. Of course, at the moment of the crime, Emily was not even 2 years old, so she could hardly say anything significant. Law enforcement officers removed a fragment of the wall with the killer's handprint, took the bloodied sheets and Emmy's clothes, and then began an active investigation. Detectives set about interviewing relatives, friends, and neighbors of the Widner family. The first to fall under suspicion was the victim's own brother, 17-year-old John Paul. However, despite all the efforts of the investigation, the boy had a solid alibi, and none of the evidence confirmed his possible involvement in his sister's murder. The police also did not overlook Emmy's ex-boyfriend, little Emily's father, Tony Abercrombie. During interrogation, he swore that he sincerely loved Emmy and would never wish her harm. Moreover, on the fateful day, the young man was at work, so his alibi was not in doubt. Troy Jackson, a longtime friend of the deceased who lived near the Widners, also came under suspicion. The police learned that Jackson was aware of the insurance on the equipment stolen on the day of the murder. Despite this, during interrogation, Troy denied any involvement in the crime. No traces of a struggle were found on the boy's body, and his hair, provided for examination, did not match the samples taken from the crime scene. Eventually, Troy was released, cleared of all suspicion after successfully passing a polygraph test. In addition to the mentioned young men, investigators thoroughly checked dozens of Emmy's classmates, friends, and neighbors. Fingerprints and hair samples were taken from each of them for analysis, but none of the witnesses and potential suspects proved to be involved in the terrible crime. Emmy Widner's funeral gathered hundreds of townspeople for whom the girl's death was a real tragedy. Detectives closely watched those present, trying to identify the possible killer. In one of her family's favorite photos, Emmy appears smiling, wearing her signature white dotted turtleneck. It was in this outfit that she was buried. Deep in her heart, Glory cherished the hope that the murderer would be caught and sentenced with all severity. However, weeks turned into months, and the investigation stubbornly reached a dead end. After her daughter's death, the woman officially adopted little Emily and devoted herself to raising her. Grief nearly drove Glory insane. Her thoughts constantly returned to the killer, who freely roamed somewhere nearby and could strike the rest of the family at any moment. From then on, the mother never left her daughters alone, and she herself was in constant anxiety. The thought of moving haunted the woman, but unfortunately, the family lacked the funds for a new home. Emmy's close friends admitted that they too were afraid to stay home alone, so they begged their parents to board up the windows. The girls trembled at the very thought that the maniac who had hurt Emmy could also get to them. One day, upon returning from work, Glory found the house empty. The woman knew for sure that school was over and the girls should have been home. Their shoes were neatly standing in their usual places. The worst premonitions pierced her soul. Glory's heart was pounding anxiously as she climbed the stairs to the second floor. Every second seemed like an eternity. Finally, the woman found herself at the door of the children's room. Hesitating only for a moment, Glory gathered her courage and opened the door. Fortunately, her fears turned out to be in vain. The girls had just fallen asleep. Years passed, and little Emily gradually grew up. Fortunately, the tragedy that befell her mother was not imprinted in the child's memory. The girl did not remember either the brutal murder, or the exhausting police interrogations, or even the moment when she was told about the death of her closest person. From time to time, investigators visited the Widner family, inevitably resurrecting in the relatives' memory the eerie events of the past. Eventually, Glory admitted that she was just tired of this endless stirring up of wounds. She just wanted to finally be left alone. Emmy would not return, so what was the point of constantly disturbing the memories of that fateful day? However, in 2002, 13 years after the murder, the case suddenly took a new turn. A 29-year-old man called the Indianapolis Police Department. He reported that Emmy had appeared to him in a dream and told him all the circumstances of her own death. Although most of the details described by the man had previously been released in the news, law enforcement carefully checked his testimony. It turned out that at the time of the murder, the eccentric witness was 16 years old and lived in a house across from the Widners' home. Examination of fingerprints and DNA samples did not reveal any matches with the case materials. After that, the man was released, as his confession did not carry any significant information. However, the very fact of the call made detectives pay attention to the forgotten case again. That same year, 2002, while studying the biography of Rodney Deng, the main suspect in Emmy's case, investigators came across a chilling fact. Dylan Deng, Rodney's own son, also had problems with the law. In 2009, when the boy was only 16, he brutally beat his own mother with a baseball bat, from which the woman died. During the trial, Dylan claimed that Mary McGinley had abused and insulted him. The young man could not restrain himself and took the fatal step. Only a few days had passed after the murder of his mother, and Dylan turned 17. The terrible crimes of the father and son occurred at practically the same age. Rodney dealt with Emmy at 18, and Dylan hurt Mary at 16. Such coincidences seemed to the detectives to be an eerie irony of fate. However, as it turned out, Rodney had never been too concerned about raising Dylan. Shortly after the birth of his son, he divorced Mary McGinley and actually crossed the child out of his own life. Rodney appeared at the trial only once to give testimony. In 2009, Dylan agreed to a plea deal with the prosecution, pleaded guilty, and was sentenced to 20 years behind bars. He will be released only in 2029, when he turns 37. But let's return to the case of Emmy Widner. For a long time, her killer Rodney Deng claimed that he did not commit the crime alone but with an accomplice named Buck. Only in June 2013, just 10 days before the court hearing, 42-year-old Deng recanted his previous testimony. He stated that he had taken the girl's life on his own, without any accomplices. Eventually, the jury found Rodney guilty and sentenced him to 65 years in prison. The solving of Emmy Widner's case in 2013, 24 years after the murder, was a long-awaited event for the victim's family. The girl's mother, brother, and sisters finally got justice and met with Detective Bill Carter, the man to whom they owed the resolution of the years-long investigation. In memory of Emmy, the Widners released 24 snow-white balloons into the sky, the number of years that the inhumane monster had taken from an innocent soul. It was the unwavering will and professional skill of Bill Carter that brought Emmy's case to its logical conclusion. Just 12 days after becoming acquainted with the materials, the detective managed to track down the killer and gather all the necessary evidence of his guilt. For his impeccable service, Carter was awarded an honorary award from the Indianapolis Police Department in January 2014. Despite recommendations from his superiors, the talented investigator refused to transfer to the Homicide Investigation Department, remaining in his current position. And what about Emily, the little daughter of Emmy Widner, who was killed at the age of 16? The girl grew up and graduated from the same school as her mother. After studying at university, Emily moved from her hometown in Indiana to sunny California, where she hoped to find more prospects for professional growth. Emily's grandmother and Emmy's mother, Gloria Widner, remained living in the house whose walls preserved the memory of the eerie murder. The woman admitted that she still misses her deceased daughter every day. Emmy's room still contains her numerous photos. From time to time, Gloria's grandchildren stay there, filling the home once shattered by tragedy with the light and joy of youth. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. Until next time, friends.